You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear 2 teachers, Andrew and Katie, discussing the coming excursion of their language class. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Well, we have this school excursion plan, but when exactly is it? Is it this Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, it can't be Tuesday with the English tests taking place.
Ah, right, not Tuesday but Wednesday.
That's right, all day Wednesday, taking a bus outside the city.
The excursion is on Wednesday, so Wednesday has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Well, we have this school excursion plan, but when exactly is it? Is it this Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, it can't be Tuesday with the English tests taking place.
Ah, right, not Tuesday but Wednesday.
That's right, all day Wednesday, taking a bus outside the city.
And where are we going?
Last month we went to Arthur Island, so this time we're going to the animal park.
Arthur Island was okay, but it was too cold. Let's hope the weather for this week's excursion is better. I don't suppose animals care about bad weather, but I certainly do. Have you heard the forecast?
Yes, and it's not too bad. Basically, they're saying Monday will be sunny.
Good.
But then the weather will change.
Not so good.
Yes. Tuesday we'll have some showers, but by Wednesday, the day of our excursion, it will be, well, their words are cold and cloudy.
Cold and cloudy. Well, as long as it isn't wet and rainy, I'm happy enough. We won't need umbrellas, just warm clothing. And what time will we get there?
Let's see, the bus picks us up at 8:30 a.m. and then it's an hour and a half on the road, so we arrive at 10 a.m. Sorry, with the 15-minute break, that will actually be 10:15 a.m.
That's early enough. Then all our students can see the animals, have their fun, and do whatever they want to do.
Well, one fun event planned that day is Birds of Prey.
What's that?
That's when they bring out several birds of prey, eagles, falcons, kites, those sorts of birds, and throw pieces of meat into the air, and the birds swoop down and eat them. It's quite impressive.
Sounds great. Birds of prey. Are there any other activities?
There's a catered lunch at the park restaurant. We've already paid for that. And in the afternoon there's... Well, I had a choice between the reptile display and the koala handling. In the reptile display, the students can handle live pythons and various other snakes.
Surely they'd rather hold koalas.
I'm sure, but the koalas can't be handled unless the weather's sunny, and given the forecast, I thought it better to choose the reptile display.
That's a shame. These Asian students would love the koala handling.
Yes, I know, but we can't control the weather.
And then we get back. What time will that be?
We leave the park at 4:30, but then we face traffic, so we won't get back until well after 6 p.m. It will most likely be 6:30, but that's better than the last trip. We didn't get home until 8:30 that time.
Yes, that was a bit too late, wasn't it?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Andrew, I understand you've been doing some research regarding the breakdown by nationality of our student body. That must have produced some interesting results.
You're right. I got some statistics from head office.
I would imagine that most of our students are either Japanese or Chinese.
You imagine right. But it's the Chinese who constitute the majority, but only just. I had thought Koreans might be second, but it's actually the Japanese, quite close behind. It's somewhat surprising, but obviously all those study tours that our university markets in Japan are bringing in students.
What's the breakdown exactly?
Japanese are a quarter of the whole, which is considerable. Last year they were only 16%, so that market has grown nicely. The only other proportions of some weight are the Indonesians and Koreans, about the same. Indonesians at 15% and the Koreans are a little higher, not like last year when they were less than 10%.
I thought we'd have more Indonesians than Koreans.
Well, as I said, they're about the same. Just like the Saudi and Thai student numbers, almost the same also, both just under 10.
Which one is bigger?
Thai students number just a fraction more. As for the other nationalities, collectively they're only 3%, so it wasn't worth giving each of them a separate category. I just grouped them under other. That's Vietnamese, South American, a couple of Russians, and so on.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Test 6, Section 2. You will hear part of a radio program about do-it-yourself house painting. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our weekly series on home improvements. Today's program is about do-it-yourself house painting. There's never been a better time for people who like to do their own interior house painting. Although people still lead very busy lives, thanks to the availability of various new DIY materials, you can now decorate your home in a more efficient and a more environmentally friendly way. In 2009 alone, approximately 53 million litres of the paint that was sold in the UK were left untouched. That's enough to fill 21 Olympic-sized swimming pools. It's easy to overestimate how much paint you'll need to decorate your room if you use guesswork. And if you know exactly how much paint is needed, you avoid unnecessary waste. There are automatic paint calculators available now. Most of the major paint manufacturers provide them. Look on their websites or just Google paint calculator and see what comes up. Then simply measure the circumference and height of the room in metres, enter this into the calculator along with the type of surface you're painting, and it will tell you how many litres of paint you'll need. But if you do end up with leftover paint, you can donate it to an organisation like Community Repaint. They will take the paint from you and redistribute it to local charities and voluntary organisations, so it goes to a good home. You can find more information about Community Repaint on communityrepaint, all one word, .org.uk.
Now you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Another way of avoiding paint wastage is to check you're completely happy with your colour choice before starting to paint. For example, you can get a small sample of the colour you're thinking of using, then paint a board and move it around the room, so you can see how it looks against your furnishings and in different lights. Also, it's always better to buy high-quality paints because you get what you pay for. If you buy cheap paint, you might need to apply 2 or 3 coats to achieve the same coverage that you'd get from 1 coat of a good quality paint. You could also spend a week on a job that could have been done in a day or 2. And consider the environment. Most paint manufacturers now sell water-based paints that don't contain harmful chemicals or give off harmful odours, so get one of these. You can also buy paint that's packaged in recyclable containers. There's a lot more choice than there used to be. You can only do a good job which will last if you prepare the surfaces thoroughly before painting. In fact, in many ways, if you want to do a professional-looking job, this is more important than the painting itself. If there are any cracks or patches of loose plaster, painting over them won't solve the problem. Take the plaster out and fill the holes, allowing enough time for the new plaster to dry. And you won't get a smooth finish if the walls are dusty or greasy. So washing with water isn't enough. Use a solution of decorator's soap and rinse well with warm water afterwards. When you're ready to paint, we suggest you use a medium pile roller for walls and ceilings. A lot of people tend to use short pile rollers, but these give a patchy finish, and that wastes paint and time. Similarly, long pile rollers can create a thick textured effect, which looks messy. The same goes for brushes. The stronger the bristles, the easier they are to wash and reuse. And as you've chosen a water-based paint, clean your brushes with cold water, because it's more energy efficient that way. As you're decorating, keep transferring small amounts of paint into a tray and keep topping it up when you need to. This reduces the chance of it being contaminated by dust and pieces of dirt. And finally, water-based paint doesn't have a lingering smell, so that's not an issue anymore. But it's airflow rather than heat that helps the paint dry quicker. So, to help finish the job in the quickest time, leave your doors and windows open. The faster the paint is dry, and the job finished, the quicker you can start enjoying your room. In tomorrow's programme, I'll be giving some advice on...
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3.
Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a counsellor and a student named John. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, John. What can I do for you?
Well, I heard about these counselling sessions from a friend doing a science course, and I was really interested. I think they should be compulsory, really.
Well, to be quite honest, John, I think they would be useful for everybody, but, well, everybody has their own way of going about things. I prefer people just to drop in when they can.
Yes.
I find that talking to students about the requirements of a course helps to clarify what needs to be done. I mean, the biggest difference between college and school is that new college students really have to do a lot of work on their own, and it's sometimes useful to get advice on how to take control of your time and work effectively.
Yes. I mean, it seems like a very light workload until assignment time comes, and then I seem to be working all night sometimes. I'm not the only one. It's ridiculous. The resource centre is very good, but it closes so early. It's in the library, and so you think you could use it more. It's a real problem for me.
Well, you're certainly not the only person in that position, as I'm sure you've found. It really comes down to using every available hour in a systematic way. If you do this with a plan, then you'll find that you still have time for yourself and your hobbies as well.
Yeah. I've heard from Thomas that you made him a sort of plan like this, and he's going away for the weekend with all his work handed in, whereas I haven't even started.
I need to find out a few more things about you first. I'll give you this form to fill in about your lectures and things before you leave.
You now have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the conversation and answer questions 26 to 30.
Now, what are your main problems?
Well, what most concerns me is I'm still not doing very well in my assignments.
Well, I know that you plan your writing carefully, but this can come to nothing if the assignment doesn't answer the question. That really is the key. You must read the question carefully and give it a great deal of thought before you even start planning or writing your first draft. It's also vital to check your work for errors. Everybody makes them, and they can influence the person marking the work. So, always take time at the end to check what you've written.
As far as listening is concerned, I find it hard to keep up sometimes in lectures, especially 2-hour ones. I sometimes just seem to go off into a dream.
It's a good idea to find out from your lecturers if they mind you recording the lectures.
Oh.
You only need one of those small cassette recorders.
Yeah.
The quality is pretty good, and a second listening can really clarify things. Something else you can do is check your notes with a friend after the lecture.
Yes, that's a good idea. Thanks. It's hard to do all that all the time, though, especially when there's so much reading to do.
Yes. It's important, though, not to confine yourself to reading on your subject. You should also read things of general interest that appeal to you. You know, novels, newspapers, that kind of thing. Do you have a good dictionary?
Not really. I've never bothered with one.
It would probably be a good idea to get one. Dictionaries aren't expensive, and they can help a lot. Also, you can underline or highlight new words, and then you've got to...
That is the end of section 3. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4.
Exam practice. Test 1. Listening part 4. You will hear a student giving a presentation about the way that different insect species are being threatened. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So today I'm going to be talking about the way that different insect species are being threatened. In other words, the reasons why some insect populations are declining and might even become extinct in the 21st century. I'll also talk about the consequences if extinction occurs and some possible ways to prevent that. Let's start with the reasons. First of all, when we look at what's going on in Europe, we can see a huge decline in certain species of insect. This is partly because farmers no longer allow certain plants to grow in their fields. But farmers are not entirely to blame. The gardens that people have nowadays don't always contain the kind of plants that insects need. So perhaps we need to rethink what we're putting there. In more tropical regions of the world, for example, the Amazon rainforest, scientists have noticed that the number of beetle and butterfly species also appears to be diminishing. They put this down to climate change, rather than, say, the fragmentation of habitat, but more research has to be done. And then there's the use of pesticide, and of course, this happens everywhere in the world. Pesticide is designed to kill a range of insects that farmers don't like, but it also kills bees, which they need. Pesticide might not kill bees directly, but we know that it impacts on their spatial skills, meaning they cannot make sense of what they see around them, and also their memory. This means that they cannot remember how to get back to their hive. So, why worry about whether insects become extinct? Well, the consequences would obviously be terrible, not just for them, but for us. Pretty much everywhere on the planet, with the exception of Antarctica, insects are at the bottom of the food chain. They're absolutely vital, because if there were no insects, there would also be no birds or lizards or mammals. Then there's the role that insects play in crop production. We use them to pollinate our fruit and vegetables, and it would be impossible to manage without them. It's also worth remembering that scientists are now studying plants to find out whether they might be a source of medicine in the future. If these plants disappear because of insect extinction, that would be another lost opportunity. So, there's some possible ways we could prevent insect extinction, some more controversial than others. I think it's a given that governments have to do something about the sale of pesticides. In fact, some countries have already passed laws to ban certain products. That's a good move forward. But ordinary people can also make a difference. If we cut down on how much meat we ate, some of the land now used for grazing could be turned back into insect-friendly environments. I'd like to finish with a positive story. There's a place in California called the Antioch Dunes. In the 1900s, people looked at the dunes and the sand that formed them and thought, that sand is a great raw material. And because they needed to build houses, they removed tons and tons of the sand and turned it into bricks. It wasn't really until the 1960s that biologists suddenly realised that the Antioch dunes had actually been home to some unique species of plant and insect. But by this time, there was only one species of butterfly left, the metalmark butterfly. And a major problem for the metalmark was that it required a certain plant to survive, something called the naked stem buckwheat. It was on this plant that it laid its eggs, so yes, you can see why the buckwheat was important. Well, in the end, the only way that the biologists could get the buckwheat to start growing properly was to replace the sand. That was a great first step, but the metalmark butterfly is still endangered. In the last decade, a significant number of butterflies and plants have been destroyed in the Antioch dunes by fire. So now, the biologists are limiting the number of visitors who can wander around the dunes. That's fair enough, I think. All right, the final point I want to make about the project to restore the Antioch Dunes area is to do with how much land is required. When we think about the concept of conservation, we often assume we need to set aside a large amount of it. And that might be true for some large species. But in this case, relatively little land was required. But the important thing is to leave it undisturbed. OK, now what I want to talk about.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.